So a very good morning or good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome to the lecture series on systematic characterization of tailing for an efficient utilization, sponsored by Sastri Indo-Canadian Institute. Now I welcome Professor Sumi Siddiqua to give a small introduction about SICI, and then we will start our series.
Thank you, Dr. Jan. Hello, everyone. Good evening in India and good morning in North America. So this lecture series is sponsored by SICI India-Canada Institute. The SICI Indo-Canadian Institute is a unique binational organization managed by Government of India and Canada to promote, facilitate, and nurture academic linkage, collaborations and exchanges, research partnership, network, and binational corridors. With its physical presence in New Delhi, India, and Calgary, Canada, a strong base of 131 Indian and 37 Canadian member institutes for past 53 years, SICI is the only organization in the Canadian-Indian higher education corridor that is instrumental in building and strengthening intellectual and cultural relationship through research and dialogue. Funded by the Ministry of Education, Government of India, it supports diverse disciplines, including social sciences, humanities, science and technology, biotechnology, agricultural arts, literature, culture, law, business, economic reform, and so on, and covers all levels of higher education from undergraduate to postgraduate and postdoctoral, and from faculty to collaborative researches. So I would like to thank you, Shastri Institute, for supporting our lecture series today. And I'm excited to bring up 4 great lectures in today's lecture presentation and also on March 24th. And I hope that you will all find it interesting, the topic that we have presented for you guys today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Siddiqua. So this collaboration is in between Indian Institute of Technology, Indian School of Mines, Dhanbad, and University of British Columbia, Canada. So the conveners are Professor Sarath Kumar Das, Professor Sumi Siddiqua, I, Dr. Surbi Jain, and Dr. Chumchi Sherian, and the postdoctoral fellow working in Civil Engineering Department. My work mostly focused on biocementation, biomineralization, and sustainable engineering, waste utilization.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for joining today for this webinar. So my name is Chinchu Cherian. I'm also a postdoctoral fellow. I'm working in School of Engineering at UBC Okanagan campus in British Columbia, Canada. And my work is mostly related to, the recycling of the industrial waste materials. And our team is looking into mostly, developing some carbon sequestration materials, next generation materials, especially for construction and for environmental applications. And I'm also doing part-time teaching at the School of Engineering as a postdoctoral teaching fellow. Yeah, that's about
We have
me.
another convener also with us, Satyam Tiwari. He is helping on all the techie things in this webinar. So I request Satyam, introduce yourself.
I just lost the track. I was talking to Nilo. Okay, so my name is Satyam Tiwari, and I'm working as a research scholar at ITS on Dhanbad. So I welcome you all for joining in this session, and we are very excited to sit in both of the talks today. So we are having some trouble for joining in Professor Nilo, but we'll get it resolved very soon. So Dr. Jan, over to you now.
So I think now Dr. Chinchu can introduce to Professor Siddiqua, and we will start with the lecture 2.
Sure. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. So first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Sumi Siddiqua to join us in this lecture. It's very early morning for us, 6:15 a.m. So I'll give a short introduction about Dr. Siddiqua to all of you. So Dr. Sumi Siddiqua is an associate professor and associate director of graduate studies in the School of Engineering at UBC Okanagan campus. So she is the leader of CFI-funded Geomaterials Research Lab, and her group develops new generation binder technology for roads. Her team focuses on transforming industrial byproducts into higher value binders that can adapt to future climate changes. And the highly industry-driven and collaborative research program has yielded many opportunities for the high quality training in the private and public sector, including academia. Dr. Siddiqua is an active leader of Women in Engineering, and she's a co-chair of Women in Science and Engineering at UBC. And due to her involvement in such critical activities, Dr. Siddiqua has also worked diligently in creating excellent environment in her lab that is welcoming for female students, and she actively hires students from diverse backgrounds. So with this, I'd welcome Dr. Siddiqua for her lecture. So the floor is yours, Dr. Siddiqua.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. There is a little bit of change of the presentation because our colleague couldn't still join from Brazil. So as you can understand, the technology helps us to connect together. At the same time, technology creates sometimes some problems for us when we're trying to connect, and it creates problems. So we'll go ahead with my presentation at the first, and then hopefully my colleague from Brazil can join. My talk is about the geotechnical and microbiological investigation on oil sand tailings for potential recycling and utilization. Oil sand tailings is a big problem in Canada, and I thought this would be a very good topic for us to talk about for this lecture, because we are talking about for the waste utilization and the waste management. So what we have here, I just have outlined the presentation into several segments. So first, just to give some oil sand tailings and environmental impacts related background, and talk about tailing management in Canada, what we follow, what are the approaches we have, and talking about investigation of TSRU tailings, which is the tailing solvent recovery units, and then major findings from our laboratory results and some key takeaways at the end. So first of all, the oil sand tailings. What is oil sand tailings? Is the byproduct of the extraction process in oil sand mining operations. So as you can see in the image over here, I'll just use the pointer so that it's easier to follow. It is the byproduct. So it is a mixture of water, sand, clay, and residual bitumen. Tailings and tailings ponds are not unique to the oil sand. So the mining industry produce the tailings from different mining industries. Tailing ponds are common to all mining and other industrial operations. So if we don't manage them properly, there are risks to human health and safety, the environment, infrastructure, and the mining companies themselves. So the proper management should be in place to handle this type of huge tailings that generates during the process of the mining production. What is the environmental impacts of oil sand tailings? So if we just talk about all the systematic environmental impacts that can be part of this process. So the first of all is the toxic slurry of heavy metals and unrecovered hydrocarbons. So this is the big concern. Giant ponds of toxic waste create air and water pollution. Leakage can pose a great risk for wildlife, especially aquatic organisms. Management of tailing ponds is one of the most difficult environmental challenges that we face, and especially in the province of Alberta, because most of our oil sand tailings, oil sand productions are from that province. And this is a growing oil sand ponds in Alberta provinces in Canada that we can see. Large volume of tailings require a large area for safe long-term storage. We need to have a proper management in place so that we don't face environmental challenges that can come from these tailings. So what are the management process in place in Canada? So if we just summarize quickly about that. So what we have here is oil sands mining recycles 80% of the water used during the production process. So water recycling is already in place. Rather than using all every time for the research recovery, every time using the fresh water, the recycling water have been, use of recycling water is in practice. 80% of the water used are recycled water during the production process. Tailing ponds are constructed with groundwater monitoring facilities, so that continuous monitoring in place about the groundwater pollution, any kind of leakage during the contaminant transport. So all those monitoring facilities are in place. Steps are taken to prevent birds from landing in the tailing ponds, which can create environmental hazards. The future tailings requires smaller ponds and faster reclamation. So the goal is to have a smaller tailing pond so that it cannot create environmental hazards, and also a faster reclamation. So that means the time for reclamation of these tailings is much quicker, so that overall impact for the environment is minimized. What is the current processing of the bitumen extraction from oil sands? So oil sands that currently use is a hot water based bitumen extraction process, which is widely used, but there are some operational and the environmental challenges. And because of that, the process used solvents are used to minimize the end product of the tailings that is used to dump in the tailing ponds. So that solvent that used for treating those tailings are going through with the tailing solvent recovery units. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because I'm going to talk about the end product coming from the tailing solvent recovery units. These units are used to strip off and recycle any residual solvent prior to disposing the fourth treatment tailing facilities in the storage pond. Modified version of the traditional flash columns and use of temperature and pressure to recover solvent. Solvent-free tailings are then stored in the tailing ponds for future reclamation. And this fourth treatment tailing, which we are calling it FTT from TSRU, which is from the Athabasca oil sand, which is a particular oil sand location in Alberta, known to certain a relatively high pyrite and residual hydrocarbon content. Due to this high pyrite and residual hydrocarbon content, there are issues that we see, which is known as acid rock drainage from the FTT deposits. So what is acid rock drainage? It is an acidic effluent generated from sulfuric waste rock piles or tailings. So sulfuric waste rock piles and tailings will cause this kind of rust water in the color, orange color, because of the sulfuric waste rock that generates oxidized in contact with the air and the environment. And ARD resulting from pyrite acidification in FFTs, the fluidic fine tailings, is the largest environmental liability facing the Canadian mining industry. The amount of acid producing mine waste in Canada is estimated to be more than 2,000 million tons, causing an environmental liability of $2 to $5 billion. So this is a huge concern. And I will just go over quickly with the oxidation process that caused the acid rock drainage. So if you look into this equation about the oxidation process, which is, I just mentioned that the acidic toxic environment produced from the oxidation of the sulfide minerals like pyrites. So this equation that is presented for the oxidation process of the formation of this acid rock drainage is in the presence of IOM and SOM. So IOM is the iron oxidizing microorganisms, and SOM is the sulfur oxidizing microorganisms. So if we have now look into the ferrous iron present in the system that oxidize and produce that ferric that precipitates in the system and the environment, and that also further oxidize. And if you look into the further oxidation, it further oxidize pyrites again in the presence of IOM, iron oxidizing microorganisms, and produce thiosulfate. Thiosulfate oxidides sulfuric acid, which is acidic in nature. Sulfuric acid will create the acidic environment in nature, and there is a presence of sulfur oxidizing microorganism in the process. So IOM mostly present at the lower pH level. So IOM is sensitive to the lower pH level, so it's present in there, but SOM present in the wide range, creates microbial succession in the development of ARD. So talk about that ARD treatment and prevention, and innovative techniques can be applied to the ARD prevention techniques. ARD treatment and prevention can be with the chemical neutralization or water capping, which is tailing ponds. And the phase present in the environment, that means the bacteria present in the environment, can be studied to understand the amount of bacteria, type of bacteria, and whether it is IOM or SOM, iron oxidizing microorganisms, or the sulfur oxidizing microorganisms. And then understand the process of phase transport through the tailings. So that can also minimize the sulfur oxidizing process and also create a neutral environment so that acid rock drainage is no longer available. By giving the background, now I'll just go over with the research goal that what we have looked into. So our main goal was to investigate the geotechnical and microbiological properties of untreated polymer amendment and sand mixed TSRU tailings. So the specific to the TSRU tailings, the work we have done, and we have tested few different types of materials. One is untreated TSRU tailings and the polymer amended TSRU tailings, and then we also tried with sand mixed, so that the impact of the sand also studied, provide the information for the consideration of subaerial disposition, and increase the knowledge about these unique tailings in management application. So if we look into the objectives and scope of the work, isolate and characterize the native microbial population of the TSRU tailings that would be related to ARD generation, and also determine the geotechnical index properties and unsaturated geotechnical characteristics of the TSRU tailings. So that was also studied. The collection of the TSRU tailing samples were performed by the operator in June 2012. And there are two types of materials collected, which is no polymer. So no polymer was added to the TSRUs, untreated ones, and then polymer treated ones. Then we have used the sand mix to get the overall picture that I just have described. So first we will talk about the microbial methods that we have used. So in the microbial method, we have used 3 reactors with 3 different pH. So the values over here shown is 2.5 pH, 4.5 pH, and 7 pH. In the reactor, we have inoculated with the 25 grams of TSRU tailings, and we use isolation for 6 days. 120 days and 350 days when we ended the test. And we looked into the bacterial isolation from the TSRU. So we wanted to find out what are the native bacteria present in the TSRU we have collected. And then we used different medium to see the growth of these microorganisms, and then worked on the DNA instruction. So what we have looked into within the 3 different pH, we can see those behavior now. If I just summarize them, not going into the detail because I know we are engineers, so we don't want to get into the microbiological details, but there's some interesting facts that we can talk about from here. So the values that we see for the pH 4.5 had the highest richness with 5 isolates. That means 5 different types of bacteria was noticed or found during the process of this isolation process that I just have mentioned. So we had 5 different isolates with pH 4.5, and then pH 2.5 and 7 had only 3 different types of isolates. And the units that we have here is the colony forming units per milliliter. Most of the isolates that we have found are known for reducing iron and sulfur. So iron oxidizing microorganisms or sulfur oxidizing microorganisms. These 3 of these isolates are found in the ARD environment, and 1 has been documented in oil sand tailings. So that's what we can analyze from our microbiological isolates that we have found from the reactor tests that we have performed. Then if we just summarize our microbiological data, so what we have done, preliminary analysis of the microbial community that is community that of interest for ARD, so acid rock drainage. That means 2 different types, iron oxidizing microorganisms or the sulfur oxidizing microorganisms. Enrichment cultures revealed that relatively low diversities using culture-based techniques. Isolated some organisms previously found in ARD sites. We checked that with the literature, and that was exciting, and established the presence of microbes capable of acid production and iron and sulfur redox in TSRU oil sand tailings. Provide a foundation for identifying microbial targets for phase therapy. So if you just remember that I mentioned that in the innovative approach that can be taken by identifying the microbial community and then allowing those microbial community transport within the TSRU or the tailings, sand tailings, and minimize the ARD environment. So bringing the pH level at the neutral, so the acidic environment is no longer present in the tailing ponds. So that was the summary from our microbiological activities that we have performed. Then we move on to the geotechnical approach, that geotechnical methods that we have undertaken for this TSRU tailings. So our work was divided in several segments. It was identifying the index properties. So as you know that all the index properties we perform for any geotechnical material. So all those basic index properties. Then we have worked on the salinity, SEM, data analysis, performed shrinkage test. It was interesting for us to look into the shrinkage test, starting with the slurry material with the rings and allowing it to dry at a natural air temperature and natural air environment, room temperature, and then take the measurements, a height and the diameter of the material over the period of 4 months. The continuous reading was taken, and then also use a TEM cell to look into the soil water characteristics. And we used suction value up to 500 kPa. Again, the measurements were taken for up to 5 months when there was no changes happened for continuously for several weeks, and we stopped the test. 4 different type of tailing samples are used because we wanted to check for the tailings without polymer treated, And then we check the tailings with polymer treated that we have received from the TSRU site. And then we use samples, sand samples, 50% sand samples and 70% sand samples with these tailings. And all those materials were tested for the geotechnical, summarized test summary that I have just presented. Either the tests were performed with slurries, the slurry materials with the fully saturated, or the natural water content. So looking at the data of this geotechnical test data, so we have geotechnical test summary presented here. So what we have noticed, the specific gravity, the data we have found for 4 different materials, is lower than what we have seen for the oil sand tailings in the literature. So this is kind of interesting fact. And basically the literature suggests a value around 2.3 to 2.65. But if you look into our 100% non-polymer and the 100% polymer data, which is much lower than what we have seen in the literature. However, when we added the sand, it increased because of the presence of sand. But our main focus on these 2 materials, which is to compare this data from the literature, and we found our specific gravity is lower than that. And also other important findings here are the non-polymer and polymer. If you look into the index properties, it's almost similar kind of behavior. And if you look into the sand to fine ratio, 100% material were higher than for fluid fine tailings. So if you look into this ratio over here, both for non-polymer and the polymer, which is higher than the FFT, which is from the literature, it shows 0.1. So this value was higher compared to the fluid fine tailings. And for the 30% material with this, sand to fine ratio, we have a value of 4, which is typical for composite tailings. So this value shows a similar kind of parameter as composite tailings. So now we will just look into the ternary diagram for a tailing classification. Just try to see where our data fits in this diagram. This ternary diagram describes the behavior for different types of tailings. So these points over here is our data for 4 different kind of materials that we are tested. We tested during the process, all sample classified as non-segregating. As you can see, it falls below this line. So above that line is the segregating materials, and below this line is non-segregating. So all these materials are non-segregating. And if you look into the data, other than this 30%, all of them are pumpable. So we can also characterize them non-segregating pumpable material, except for this 30% data point, which is outside of the pumpable data points. And if you now look into our 100% polymer data, samples is slightly desaturated material, thick and tailing material. So TT is defined as thick and tailing. So this data point is close to that TT. And if you look into these arrows, these are the direction of desaturation for these materials. And if you look into the 50% sample, which is between the CT and NST, which is composite tailings and also non-segregating tailings. And so that's what we have on, it was the 30% material. So 50% is between 30% and 100%. And these arrows are showing the direction of this desaturation for all those TTC, CT, NST, all those tailings from this ternary diagram. So it fits well with the non-segregating pumpable materials. So all the data points that shows a confidence on the classification of the material as well, which is important when we are dealing with the tailing management. So now we will look into the SEM for both non-polymer and polymer samples that we have identified and tested in our lab. So what we see the major difference, this is the diagram image for the non-polymer, and this is the image for the polymer, 100% polymer. So the main difference between these two material was we see the flock structure for polymer amended tailings, and which we don't see that non-polymer tailings. So this is a major difference on the structure when we look into these images on SEM images. Next, we will move on to our data for shrinkage test. So if you just look into the data for different samples tested for the shrinkage limit, and this black line over here is line of saturation. So the reason for us to look for the line of saturation so that it is clear for us to see the deviation from this line of saturation for each data points for all these materials that we have looked into. So air enters when the deviation happens from the line of saturation. And if we just look into this red line here, which shows the shrinkage limit intersect of the stable volume and the line of saturation. So these are where we have the stable volume and they intersect with the line of saturation for this material. So two important things to look for here is a non-polymer 100% sample, which is this darker points here. It shows the highest shrinkage limit, so 54%. And for the 100% sampled, the polymer sample showed early deviation. So you can see from that points here, this is early deviation from the line of saturation. So these are the two key things that we can see. And this early deviation likely due to the residual hydrocarbon present in this sample. Okay, now we will move on to the next one, the next data points here with the gravimetric and the volumetric soil water characteristics curve. So if you look into those data points, water content with respect to the suction and 4 different samples that we have tested, again, we are just presenting in 2 different types of water content, gravimetric and the volumetric. And because we have tested only for 500 kPa suction level for this material, there is no, there is no point of looking into the high suction level because we already found out what is the range we need to work for these materials. And we saw that, for non-polymer material, so the non-treated material has a higher air entry if you compare with both image plots. So you see the similar pattern, and also for other materials, it's almost same, identical values that we have seen for 2 different presentations that we have here. And then we have seen the different shapes for the polymer treated materials and the non-polymer treated materials. So that's probably the one of the significant behavior we can see because of the residual hydrocarbon. We see the different types of behavior for polymer treated and then non-polymer treated. And same thing for the degree of saturation data. If we just look into that, what we see for these polymer samples, it behaves like a non-polymer samples at the beginning when there was no air entry. When it started to show the air entry, then it started to behave the rest of the materials like the sand materials. So this is the major findings from this data. And polymer amended samples requires less energy, lower suction to desaturate it after air entry, value reached. So that's another findings. Polymer amended may also contain higher residual water, and non-polymer air entry value was bigger. If you see the value, which is 54 kPa, that's a shrinkage effect. And then polymer material has no change on the air entry value. So there is no shrinkage effect on there. So that's the major difference between these two type of material. So non-polymer has a shrinkage effect and showing the high air entry value, and polymer material and polymer treated material didn't have the shrinkage effect. So the last figure on these geotechnical tests are the self-weight consolidation that we are going to talk about here. We have only looked into the non-polymer samples, 100% tailing samples, and the polymer 100% tailing samples. The shape are different. The non-linear shape was observed for the polymer treated sample. And this type of shape is common from the literature for different polymer type, for the concentration of the polymer and testing conditions. So both shapes are common for polymer treated sample, but for our case, we have only seen the non-linear behavior for the self-weight consolidation test data. So polymer treated sample showed higher dewaterability from the data points, as you can see from these two diagrams. And we used two different densities for this material. So the initial packing density for non-polymer was 1.3 gram per centimeter cube, gram per cc. And then for polymer treated one, it was 1.5 gram per cc. So take home message could be for the material we have received from the TSRU unit, polymer treated, we saw the non-linear behavior. Again, it's referring to the residual hydrocarbon, could be the reason that we see this kind of behavior. But in the literature, we have seen both a linear behavior and non-linear behavior for polymer treated materials. So, and that depends on the type of the polymer concentration and the type of the test that performed. So let's talk about the key takeaways from here. From the microbial characteristics, we have identified some of the native microbial community with potential role in ARD production. Either it is iron oxidizing microorganisms or the sulfur oxidizing microorganisms. And it provides potential microbial targets for phase therapy. So we know what is available in the tailings, this type of tailings, and I should not be generalizing. The tailings that we have tested, we identified some the native microbial community. So then we can look into the phase therapy. Results add to the knowledge of the microbiology of the oils and tailings, which is important because then you know how these microorganisms can be used to treat different types of environmental impacts that we see for this during the tailing management process. The key takeaways from geotechnical characteristics, we have seen the lower specific gravity. So that was the important finding for our work, which was much lower compared to the fluid fine tailings for the tailing ponds. Polymer amended tailings exhibited better unsaturated characteristics compared to the non-polymer, and tailing sand mixed increased drainage. So when we added sand to the tailing materials, we saw a better drainage performance, but other properties may not be suitable for full-scale operation. So we didn't see any significant impact of adding sand in the tailings for if you think about the full-scale operation. And what we can also look into as a future research areas based on our knowledge on this work that we have performed. Our preliminary microbiological and the geotechnical characterization provided a foundation for future studies with the molecular biology work and the phase isolation, phase transport studies, geotechnical method refinement for this material. And then we can also look into the strength testing, because now The goal is to identify applications of these oils and tailings. We produce a lot of oils and tailings, especially in the province of Alberta. Finding a solution for use value-added product from these tailing materials, either in the construction industry or in the water treatment facilities, and any innovative techniques that can be developed. It's welcome by the industry itself, and also by the government and the provincial government in Canada, and also the federal government in Canada, by looking into the bigger picture, minimizing the impact of carbon dioxide to the environment, waste generation, and also finding a solution where we minimize our waste production, any industrial activities we do. So that's summarize my presentation, and just provide the references, and also wanted to acknowledge my graduate student, Ms. Courtney Dean, who worked with me in the project, and my collaborator from the microbiology side, Dr. Roberts, who worked on the microbiological side in this investigation, and the TSRU units who's provided us the important material, but we should not be mentioning the name of the industry, so we're just keeping it secret. But one of the oil sands companies provided the material for our work, and also the funding support from NSERC, federal funding support from NSERC was important, instrumental for performing this experimental work, time-consuming experimental work. And also like to thank Shastri, Indo-Canada Institute, for giving the opportunity to make for this lecture series, and then presenting my work in here. And I will stop here and welcome any questions you have about this work we have performed. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Siddiqua, for this very informative talk. So I'm sure that all of us have got some new insights into the, especially to the investigation on oil sand tailings. And I'm sure that most of these advanced techniques that we have discussed today, this is applicable not only to the oil sand waste, but also to other similar types of waste materials. So at this point, I'd like to request the audience, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab to type in your questions. So we can discuss some of the questions right here within the available time. And then also, if you have any further questions, you are very well free to or welcome to email us your questions, and we can get back to you as soon as possible. So please type in your questions in the Q&A session. So the question is, to Dr. Siddiqua, have you ever tried any pilot or field study of microbiology experiment on acid mine drainage or any other ways?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's an important question because we are talking about this process a lot. Field studies are performed in a small scale. However, our goal is to identify the phase transport mechanism after knowing the microbial community. So we are still in the process of developing that. That's why the full-scale pilot test was not performed. And when we work with microorganisms, there are a lot of logistics behind it. So in short, I will say that small scale tests were performed to check. In a short term, impact is very limited. We need to work for a long-term period. So that's what we have found. But at the time, it is in progress. So I don't have a conclusive answer for that, what we have seen in the lab scale and how it will be impacting in the big, field scale when we do that. And other waste, of course, we work with a lot of other different types of waste. For example, the recent one, we are working with pulp and paper mill waste product in a different forms of waste, and especially the fine waste, which is the fly ash. And we have tested that for road applications in a connecting road in the pulp mill site, the pulp mill that we have been working on. And we have developed a recipe that we work with a local contractor and tested that in their site, and it's been almost more than 6-7 months and working fine, and we'll be monitoring the outcome of that road and see how the performance in the long run for our method. Thank you for the question.
Professor Siddiqua, I'll come again to that microbiology thing. So when we are when you are taking some of the native microorganisms, what you are looking for, like how they are working in the field, like what kind of chemical processes or biochemical processes?
The reason is we did not added foreign microorganisms. We looked into the microorganisms present in the oil sand tailings itself, and we identified 5 different types of microorganisms. And then 3 of them basically was working, iron oxidizing microorganisms. So our goal is to find those microorganisms and then feed them properly so that it started to release the chemicals that needed to minimize the acid rock drainage. So that was the goal.
Okay, so that the same kind of biochemical process we can accelerate in the field.
Yeah, that was the goal for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 2 more questions. I'll just quickly go through the questions. So this is from Dr. Lini Dev. So the question is whether the oil sand tailings can be adopted for soil strength improvement as a stabilizer.
Yes, if you can see that I have mentioned in my presentation in the future work that strength component I have added. So that was the goal. We have characterized the material and for the index properties and the other important information related to unsaturated soil, because our partner organization was interested to know about the unsaturated behavior. And it indicated that it has the quality that we can start on, but there has to be some chemical treatment or microbiological treatment of this material to make it stronger. Of course, the goal is towards that direction to find a solution for this material in the construction industry or similar type of industry so that it can bring value added product rather than sitting in the tailing ponds and making our environment, impacting our environment in a negative way. Great question. Thank you.
And one last question, I think with this we can wrap up. So how significant is the thermal properties of polymer treated TSRU tailings when it comes to application in the construction industry? So the question is about the thermal properties of the polymer treated tailings.
I don't have a lot more insight about that, but thermal properties are important. The reason is that we have seen when we look into the curing process for any material development, and we have seen if we add some temperature, it accelerates the process of the curing. So if you look into from that point of view, the thermal properties are important, how much temperature it can sustain and still contain the properties of the material itself. So I would say, of course, thermal properties is something important to look into. We have that on our plate, but we haven't presented that in this discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqua. And there are some more questions. I think many audience.
I'll just answer that, the last one. Maybe you can go ahead, one last question.
Yes.
2 more questions, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have 2 more, more coming up. So this is from Washikar Rahman. So the question is, so the biosolids appropriately treated waste sludge can make an important contribution to sustainable environmental management through the return of organic matter, trace elements, moisture, and nutrients to our soils. Do you have any such process research which can get faster and quicker biosolids?
Thank you for the question. Of course, interesting one. Get a faster and quicker biosolids is possible if we have a right medium, because that's the first thing, how we can use the medium and the growth of the microorganisms. If you can manipulate those, it will possible to achieve the outcome quicker than in the natural process, of course. So you have to feed with the right medium for these microorganisms to grow and act quicker, so that we have a final outcome develop in shorter period of time. So it will be interesting topic, and I'll be happy to answer that if you can email me, and we can discuss further about this. I think this is the last one. There is another question.
There are a few more.
Oh.
So do we have
Yeah,
time
we can
to
continue.
continue? Okay.
Yeah, we can
sure.
continue.
Okay, so the next question is from Avinash Kumar. So can you please tell us whether this material has some inherent blending properties so that they can be used along with some fine aggregates?
The geotechnical properties were not very promising, but it's not bad. So it can be added with some additives, like you are mentioning, some other fine materials, and then tested for the application related to road pavements. But one important thing you have to remember, you have to look for the toxic substances, because that's what we are worried about. If it leaches out, and it can harm the environment. So you need to find out, what type of heavy metals are there, what type of chemicals are there, and run the leaching test when you are adding some additives. And then you can, use this material for road application. So people are trying that. So there is a pre-treatment before you add some additives, and then after doing the pre-treatment of this material, you can try with different additives and find your strength properties.
So here is another question from Abhijit Mistry. So if we wish to treat tailings, then probably we want to improve certain properties of the material. So when we are applying a microbial treatment method, what specific property will be most impactful after the treatment?
It's about finding the pH level, getting into the neutral. So that was the target of our work, because we are looking at the acidic environment. So making sure it's no longer acidic. So it bring it to the neutral pH level, because we were looking into the environmental point of view. So that was the key thing about when you're working with the acid rock drainage.
I think that's all we have. Okay, there is one last question regarding the application of such waste materials in pavements. So the question is, when we are trying to use the treated materials in pavements, do you consider CBR and resilient modulus values, especially for subgrade materials?
People are using both, and you will probably find a model based on CBR data and the resilience modulus. So depend on the local industry practice, you should pick either CBR or the resilient modulus. I think, it depends on your local industry, what they are supporting, but both are accepted. So there is no superior or non-superior. And also current trend is to find out the strength parameters and correlate that with the behavior. So it's not necessarily only the CBR or the resilient modulus. So as long as you have to you can justify the strength properties of the material, and it is applicable and suitable for the applications you're looking into, that should be good enough. And you will find a lot of literature along this line in current studies.
So thank you to all the attendees for your wonderful questions, and thank you, Dr. Siddiqua, for your kind answers. So now I'd like to request Professor Das to once again thank Dr. Siddiqua and welcome Professor Consoli for the second talk.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Dr. Chinchu. Yeah, it was a nice presentation, Professor Sumi. So actually, we could able to see it, lots of queries from the participants. This topic is really interesting. So you have got around 10 questions from the participants. It's really, I mean, this is a new and interesting topic. People are coming forward with so many queries. And so thank you very much. And thank you also to be here with us, preponing your lecture by 1 hour. So thank you very much to adjust the timing.